Your daughters are in there, a little girl told a millionaire who had lost his twin daughters. Then they entered the abandoned house that the girl pointed to and discover something shocking. Comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I really want to know where you are from. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The rain lashed against the windows of the Miller furniture factory with an intensity that seemed to echo the despair consuming John for the past 2 years. At 52, the successful businessman from Napa Valley had become a shadow of his former self. His graying hair was unkempt, his unshaven face reflected his neglect, and his brown eyes, once bright and determined, now carried a deep sadness that seemed endless. It was 2 in the afternoon on a rainy Tuesday in April when John left the factory early for the 3rd time that week. His employees were already whispering in the hallways about the boss's strange behavior, who was once known for his obsessive dedication to work. But ever since Isabella and Valentina disappeared during that cursed outing in Central Park, John couldn't concentrate on anything anymore. Every project he looked at, every piece of furniture that was produced, every company success seemed empty and meaningless compared to the void his 8-year-old twin daughters had left in his life. His marriage to Mary had collapsed 6 months after the disappearance. She couldn't stand to see him scouring every corner of the city anymore, distributing flyers, offering rewards that reached $100,000, confronting strangers on the street who bore remote resemblances to his girls. "You're sick, John!" she had shouted during their last argument before packing her bags and moving in with her sister in Chicago. "You chose this obsession over the family we still have." But how could she not understand? How could he simply move on when his little ones were lost somewhere, possibly suffering? Possibly John shook his head violently, pushing away the dark thoughts that tormented him every night. He drove his pickup truck through the wet streets of Napa Valley, passing through the most upscale neighborhoods where he lived, until he reached the outskirts of town. In recent months, he had developed the habit of distributing food to the homeless and needy families, an activity that somehow calmed his anguish. Perhaps it was the fact of helping other people in vulnerable situations, or perhaps it was the secret hope that by doing good, the universe would return his daughters to him. He stopped in front of a rundown housing project where he knew several families were in need. He carried the bags of groceries from the back seat and began his routine distribution. It was when he reached the end of the street, near a disused industrial warehouse, that he saw her for the first time. Daisy was a 4-year-old girl who seemed to have come out of a nightmare. Her brown hair was completely disheveled and dirty, forming knots that seemed to have never seen a comb. Her clothes were rags that barely covered her thin little body, and she was sitting alone on the sidewalk, playing with small stones that she arranged in rows. But it was her eyes that paralyzed John. Dark, penetrating eyes that seemed to carry a wisdom far beyond her 4 years, a sadness he recognized intimately. "Hi, little one," said John, crouching down to her height with a bag of food in his hands. "Are you alone?" Daisy looked up at him, studying his face with a disturbing intensity. For a long moment, she just watched him in silence, as if assessing whether she could trust him. Then, in a hoarse voice that sounded strange in such a small child, she whispered, "I know where your daughters are." John's world stopped. The sound of the rain, the distant sound of traffic, even his own breathing seemed to cease completely. He felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "What did you say?" Daisy pointed with her dirty little finger to the industrial warehouse at the end of the street. "Your daughters are in there, Izzy and Val. They left drawings for you to find." John's legs trembled so much that he almost fell backward. How could that child know his daughters' names? How did she know they drew? Isabella and Valentina loved to draw. It was one of their favorite activities. His heart raced so much that he thought he might have a heart attack right there, on the rain-soaked sidewalk. "How do you know?" he asked with a choked voice, gently grabbing the girl's small shoulders. "How do you know their names?" Daisy stood up and began to walk towards the warehouse, looking back to make sure John was following her. I used to live in there with other kids. There were lots of drawings on the walls. Some had the name Izzy, others had Val. Drawings of butterflies and flowers. John followed her as if he were in a trance, his steps getting faster as they approached the abandoned building. The warehouse was immense, with broken windows and a rusty metal door that was ajar. Daisy pushed the door with surprising force for her size, and the two entered the damp and silent space. What John saw inside the warehouse made his legs finally give way. On the grey concrete walls, hundreds of children's drawings were glued or scribbled directly onto the surface. There were drawings of houses, animals, families, suns, clouds, flowers, an explosion of colour and childhood imagination that contrasted drastically with the desolation of the place. And there, right in the centre of a wall, were unmistakable drawings, purple butterflies with a signature Izzy underneath, and yellow daisies signed Val. John approached the wall, trembling, reaching out to touch the drawings as if they were sacred relics. They were exactly the way his daughters drew. Isabella always made butterflies with huge and detailed wings, and Valentina loved simple but colourful flowers. The signatures were identical to the handwriting he knew so well from their school notebooks. "Where are they now?" he asked, turning to Daisy with tears streaming down his face. "Where are my girls?" The tiny child looked at him with a sad expression. "A lady came to get all the children. She said she was going to take them to a better place, that they would have food every day and warm beds. But I was scared and hid. When she left with the others, I ran away from here." "What lady? What did she look like?" John crouched down again, his hands trembling as he held Daisy's shoulders. "A woman with black hair and glasses. She spoke nicely, like the teachers at school. She said her name was Connie. She always came here to bring food and blankets for the children. She said she knew good families who wanted to take care of boys and girls without a mommy and daddy." The name Connie echoed in John's mind like a distant echo. There was something familiar about it, but he couldn't place the memory. His mind was clouded by the discovery of the drawings and the closeness he felt to his daughters for the first time in 2 years. When did this happen? When did she take the children? Daisy counted on her little fingers, concentrating intensely. "Many days ago, when it was still cold in the morning. I've been here alone for a long time." John calculated mentally. If it had been during the winter, it had been at least 3 or 4 months. A chill ran down his spine as he thought of his girls being taken by a stranger to an uncertain destiny, but at the same time, a desperate hope sprouted in his chest. For the first time in 2 years, he had a concrete lead. He had a name: Connie. The rain had stopped outside, and rays of sunlight began to enter through the broken windows of the warehouse, illuminating the drawings on the walls. John stood up slowly, his gaze sweeping over each drawing, each mark left by the children who had passed through there. How many families would be as desperate as him, looking for their children? How many stories of suffering had those walls witnessed? "Daisy," he said finally, "don't you have anyone taking care of you?" The girl shook her head. "My mum left a long time ago. I don't remember her face very well." John felt his heart break once more. That child was completely abandoned, surviving alone on the streets of Napa Valley while he desperately searched for his own daughters. "Do you want to come with me? I can give you food, a warm bath, clean clothes." Daisy's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, she smiled, a small and hesitant but genuine smile. "Will you let me go later?" "Only if you want to leave," replied John, reaching out to her. "But now can you help me find Connie?" Daisy took his hand, and together they left the warehouse towards the pickup truck. John knew that his life had changed completely in those last few minutes. He had a lead on his daughters, a new responsibility with Daisy, and a renewed determination that he hadn't felt in 2 years. But he also knew that the journey that began now would be even more difficult and painful than everything he had faced until then. John's house in Napa Valley seemed like a museum of pain. Each room held untouched memories of Isabella and Valentina. The girls' rooms remained exactly as they were on the day of the disappearance, with dolls still scattered on the floor and drawings stuck to the refrigerator. When Daisy stepped into the living room for the first time, her eyes widened at the sight of the twins' photographs scattered on every available surface. It was as if she had entered the sanctuary of two children she knew only from the scribbles left on the cold walls of an abandoned warehouse. "It's them," whispered Daisy, pointing to a photo where Isabella and Valentina smiled, hugging in the garden. Izzy always laughed louder than Val, and Val liked to kiss the flowers before drawing. John's heart squeezed as he heard such intimate details about his daughters coming from the mouth of a child who shouldn't even know them. How did Daisy know these specific characteristics? How many days had they lived together in that dark warehouse? During the next 3 days, John immersed himself in an obsessive search for any trace of a woman named Connie. He left Daisy in the care of Rose, his former housekeeper who had returned to work for him after learning about the girl's situation. He toured all of Napa Valley, visited orphanages, daycare centers, health centers, churches, anywhere a social worker or volunteer with that name might have worked. On the 4th day, his perseverance was unexpectedly rewarded. Father Michael, from St. Mary's Church, frowned when John mentioned the name. Connie Marquez," murmured the religious man, shuffling through old papers on his desk. "She worked here as a volunteer a few years ago. A very dedicated woman to needy children, but there was something about her that worried me." "What kind of worry?" John leaned forward, his heart racing. "She was excessively involved. She was disturbed when we saw children at risk and couldn't do more than offer basic assistance. She always said she knew special families who could take better care of these children than their own troubled families." John's blood ran cold. "Do you know where I can find her?" Father Michael hesitated before answering. "I heard she was fired from her job at City Hall a few months ago. Problems related to irregular procedures in the area of social assistance. But I heard she was living in a housing project near downtown." With the address written on a crumpled piece of paper, John drove to the St. Vincent housing project. It was a complex of dilapidated buildings where low-income families struggled to survive. He went up to the 3rd floor of Block B and knocked on the door of apartment 304. A woman in her 50s opened the door, and John immediately recognized the description that Daisy had given. Black hair, already graying, eyeglasses, and an expression that mixed kindness with something indefinably disturbing. "Connie Marquez?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. The woman recoiled slightly. "Who wants to know?" "My name is John Miller. I need to talk to you about some children that you helped." Connie's face paled, and she looked nervously to both sides of the hallway before allowing him to enter. The apartment was small and dark, with piles of documents and photographs scattered everywhere. John immediately noticed dozens of photos of children pasted on the walls, boys and girls of various ages, all with vulnerable expressions. "I always wanted to help," Connie began, before John could even ask any questions. Her hands trembled as she arranged papers on the table. So many children suffering, so many families who don't know how to take care of their children properly. I found better families, people who could give real love. Where are my daughters? John went straight to the point, his voice filled with a pain he could no longer hide. Connie looked at him confused. Your daughters? I don't understand. Isabella and Valentina Miller. 2 8-year-old twin girls. They were in the warehouse on Industrial Street. A child told me that you took them to a family. The confusion on Connie's face turned into something that looked like recognition, then fear. The girls from the butterfly drawings, she murmured. They talked so much about their dad I thought they were orphans, like the others. John felt the world spin around him. Orphans? They are not orphans. I am their father. They disappeared 2 years ago. No, no, no. Connie began to shake her head frantically. They were abandoned, alone, starving. I just wanted to help. I found a beautiful family for them, good people who really wanted to have children. What family? Where? Connie ran to a drawer and began rummaging through papers desperately. I have everything written down. I always write everything down. The Van der Lins, a Dutch couple who have a flower farm in Lompoc. They lost a child years ago and really wanted to be parents again. Lompoc, the city of flowers, just a few hours from Napa Valley. John felt a mixture of hope and terror run through his body. His daughters were alive. They were a few hours away from him, but they had also been living with strangers for months, possibly thinking they had been abandoned by him. Do you have the exact address? Connie handed him a paper with a trembling handwriting. Tulip Valley Farm, on Happy Valley Road 247. But please, you need to understand, I never wanted to do any harm. I really thought I was saving those children. John took the paper and headed for the door, but stopped before leaving. How many children have you done this to? I lost count, admitted Connie, collapsing into a chair. But they all went to good families, I swear. I always checked if they were trustworthy people. As he left the apartment, John immediately called Mary. The phone rang several times before his ex-wife answered with a cold voice. John, I told you I don't want to. Mary, I found them, he interrupted, his voice choked with emotion. I found Isabella and Valentina. The silence on the other end of the line lasted an eternity. When Mary spoke again, her voice was broken. What are you saying? They are in Lompoc with a Dutch family. A woman took them thinking they were orphans. Mary, our girls are alive. The sob that came through the phone made John's heart break again. For 2 years, Mary had struggled between hope and acceptance that her daughters might have left forever. Now, the possibility of reuniting with them left her completely vulnerable. I'm going with you, she said finally. When? Now. I'll pick you up in San Francisco. John, what if they don't remember us? What if they're happy there and don't want to come back? It was exactly the fear that had haunted John since he left Connie's apartment. His daughters were 8 years old when they disappeared. Now they were 10. 2 years was an eternity in a child's life. How much of the memories of him and Mary still remained intact? How much of this new Dutch family had become their real world? It doesn't matter, he replied, although his voice betrayed his own uncertainty. They are our daughters. We're going to bring them home. But as he drove back home to pick up Daisy before heading to San Francisco, a series of haunting questions began to bombard his mind. How would he explain to the girls that he hadn't abandoned them? How would he make them understand that he had looked for them every day for 2 years? And more importantly, how could he guarantee that this transition wouldn't traumatize them even further? When he arrived home, he found Daisy playing in the garden with Rose. The girl ran towards him with a smile on her face, the first genuine smile he had seen since he found her. Did you find Connie? She asked, her eyes shining with hope. I did, and I found out where Izzy and Val are. Daisy's smile faltered slightly. Are you going to get them now? John crouched down to her height, realizing for the first time the emotional complexity that this situation created. Daisy had become attached to him in recent days, and he knew she was afraid of being abandoned again when his real daughters returned. Daisy, you're going to continue to be part of our family, he said firmly. Isabella and Valentina will love having a little sister. But even as he spoke those words, John wondered if he could fulfill that promise. What would it be like to bring together 3 girls who had gone through such different traumas? How would he balance the emotional needs of his biological daughters with those of Daisy, who also desperately needed stability and love? That night, as he prepared for the most important trip of his life, John looked out the window of his room towards the city of Lompoc. Somewhere in those flowerlands, his daughters were sleeping, possibly without imagining that the father they loved so much was just a few miles away, planning the reunion that would change all their lives forever. The trip to Lompoc seemed to last an eternity. John drove in silence, with Mary in the passenger seat and Daisy sleeping in the back seat. The reunion with his ex-wife had been tense and painful. Mary was visibly thinner, with deep dark circles under her eyes that betrayed sleepless nights, and her gaze carried a mixture of desperate hope and fear of what they might find. "Do you really believe it's them?" asked Mary for the 10th time, her trembling voice breaking the silence of the car. "Daisy knew details that only our girls would know," replied John, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "The drawings in the warehouse were identical to the ones they made." Tulip Valley Farm was located in a rural area of Lompoc, surrounded by colorful fields of flowers that stretched as far as the eye could see. When they finally arrived at the gate of the property, John felt his heart race. A sign in English and Dutch indicated that Hendrik and Marika van der Linde lived there. The house was large and welcoming, with an impeccably maintained garden, where dozens of varieties of tulips created a mosaic of colors. John parked in front of the porch and took a deep breath before waking Daisy. "We're here," he said softly, watching the girl rub her sleepy eyes. Hendrik van der Linde appeared at the door before they could even knock. He was a tall man, about 60 years old, with white hair and kind blue eyes. His face showed surprise at seeing the unexpected visitors. "Can I help you?" he asked in English with a heavy accent. "Mr. van der Linde, my name is John Miller. I need to talk to you about 2 girls who are living here, Isabella and Valentina." Hendrik's expression changed instantly, going from cordiality to evident concern. "How do you know about the girls?" "Because they are my daughters," replied John, his voice choked with emotion. Marike appeared behind her husband, a woman in her 50s with graying blonde hair and a maternal expression. Upon hearing John's words, she put her hands to her mouth in shock. "This isn't possible," she said in hesitant English. "Connie told us they were orphans, that they had no family." "Connie lied," Mary interjected, getting out of the car with tears in her eyes. "Our daughters disappeared 2 years ago during a walk in the park. We have documents, birth certificates, photographs." At that moment, childish laughter echoed from the back of the house. John felt his legs weaken as he recognized that sound he had missed so much. It was the laughter of his daughters. "Opa, come see!" shouted a child's voice in English mixed with Dutch words. "The yellow tulips have bloomed." Hendrik and Marika exchanged anguished glances. For months they had become deeply attached to the girls, treating them like the granddaughters they never had. The possibility of losing them was devastating. "Please, come in," said Hendrik finally. "But the girls, they call us Opa and Oma. They don't remember you for a long time." As they entered the house, John was overcome by a surreal feeling. The atmosphere was welcoming, with photographs of the girls scattered on the walls, children's drawings on the refrigerator, and toys carefully arranged around the room. It was evident that Isabella and Valentina were loved and well cared for there. "Oma! Oma!" shouted 2 voices coming from the backyard. When the girls came running through the kitchen door, time seemed to stop completely. Isabella and Valentina were older, with more mature faces, but they were unmistakably his daughters. Isabella had longer brown hair, tied in a ponytail, and Valentina kept her hair short as she had always liked. Both wore colorful clothes and had happy and healthy expressions. But when they saw the unfamiliar visitors, the girls stopped abruptly, hiding behind Marike with shyness. "Who are they, Oma?" asked Valentina, clinging to the Dutch woman's skirt. John felt as if he had been stabbed in the heart. His own daughters didn't recognize him. 2 years had been enough time to erase their memories of him and Mary. "Girls," said Marieke in a soft voice, "these are people who came to talk to us about you." Mary couldn't contain herself. She fell to her knees at the girl's height, tears streaming down her face. "Isabella, Valentina, do you remember Mommy?" The twins exchanged confused glances. There was something familiar about that crying woman. something that stirred distant and hazy memories. Isabella was the first to take a hesitant step towards Mary. You look like someone from my dreams," she whispered, "and you have the same voice as the woman who sang to me when I was sad," added Valentina, still cautious. John crouched down too, reaching out carefully. "Isabella, do you remember when we used to make hot chocolate together on Sunday mornings? And Valentina, remember when you taught me to draw daisies the way you liked?" Recognition began to shine slowly in the girl's eyes. They were fragments of memories that had been buried, but not completely lost. "Chocolate Daddy," murmured Isabella, using the expression that only she knew. Valentina took a step closer, studying John's face intently. "You let me use your special pencil to draw." "That blue pencil that you said had magical powers," confirmed John, his voice broken by emotion. Daisy, who had been quiet until then, timidly approached the twins. "I saw your drawings in the place where you lived before, Izzy's butterflies and Val's flowers." The girls looked at Daisy with curiosity, but still kept their distance. The reconnection process would be long and delicate. Hendrik cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Perhaps we should talk alone first. The girls can stay in the garden while the adults talk." During the next hour, in a tense conversation in the living room, the complete truth was revealed. Hendrik and Marika told how Connie had appeared at their door 6 months ago, bringing 2 traumatized and poorly cared for girls. They had tried to contact authorities, but Connie had presented documentation that seemed official, claiming that the girls were orphans looking for a temporary home. "We lost our only child 15 years ago," explained Marika, wiping away tears. "When the girls arrived, it was as if our family was complete again. They brought us a joy that we thought we had lost forever." John understood their pain, but his own anguish was unbearable. "Do you understand that they are our daughters? That we suffered for 2 whole years, thinking that something terrible had happened to them?" "Of course we understand," replied Hendrik, "but you also need to understand that for the girls, we are the only stable family they have known for months. Forcing an abrupt separation can traumatize them even more." It was then that Marieka made an unexpected proposal that would change everything. What if we found a way for all of us to remain in their lives? They could spend time with you and with us. We have financial resources, and you have the love of biological parents. Maybe together we can give them the stability they deserve." Mary looked at John in surprise. The idea was unconventional, but it offered a solution that could benefit everyone. "Would you really do that?" asked John, barely believing what he was hearing. "We love these girls as if they were our granddaughters," said Hendrik. "If that means sharing them with you so that they are truly happy, then that is what we will do." But at that moment, screams from the garden interrupted the conversation. They ran outside and found Daisy on the ground, crying, while Isabella and Valentina watched her frightened. "She said she was leaving, because now you have your daughters back," explained Valentina with tears in her eyes. "But we don't want her to leave. She seems sad like we were before." John realized that he had completely underestimated the emotional impact that this situation would have on Daisy. The girl had finally found a family, only to see that family reunite with its real daughters, leaving her again without a place in the world. In that flower-filled garden in Lompoc, 5 children and 4 adults faced the complex task of rebuilding not one, but several families that had been torn apart by tragic circumstances. And John realized that the hardest part of his journey was just beginning. 6 months after the reunion in Lompoc, John's life had been transformed in ways he had never imagined possible. The unconventional solution proposed by the Van Derlins had worked better than anyone could have predicted, but not without its complexities and moments of deep pain. Isabella and Valentina now divided their time between the flower farm in Lompoc and John's house in Napa Valley. During the week, they attended a bilingual school in Lompoc, where they learned English and Dutch, living with Hendrik and Marike. On weekends and holidays, they stayed with John, Mary, and Daisy, slowly rebuilding the family ties that had been interrupted. The process had not been easy. In the beginning, the girls felt divided between two worlds, two families, two realities. Valentina, always more introspective, spent weeks asking why she had been left in the park on that fateful day. Isabella developed recurring nightmares where she was constantly lost, waking up screaming, calling for either Daddy or Opa. But it was Daisy who brought unexpected healing to the whole family. After that emotional breakdown in the farm's garden, something extraordinary happened. Isabella and Valentina, recognizing in Daisy's sadness a mirror of their own pain, made a decision that surprised all the adults. They asked Daisy to stay with them, declaring that she was their sister of the heart and that they didn't want to live without her. Daisy doesn't have a mommy and daddy either, just like we didn't have, Isabella had said with her childish wisdom. Now we all have a family. No one is alone anymore. What started as an innocent proposal from children turned into a complex but loving legal reality. Mary, surprising everyone, including herself, was the one who suggested officially adopting Daisy. "I lost 2 years with my daughters," she had said with tears in her eyes. "I'm not going to miss a single day being a mother to this girl who needs so much love." Now, on a sunny October morning, John watched the 3 girls playing in the garden of his house in Napa Valley. Daisy, who had gained weight and whose hair now shone silky and well-groomed, was teaching Isabella and Valentina to make drawings in the dirt with twigs, passing on a skill she had learned during her difficult months on the street. The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. At the door, he found a middle-aged man, accompanied by a woman carrying a photograph in her hands. "Mr. Miller," asked the man nervously, "my name is Carlos Santana. This is my wife, Regina. We heard that you had contact with a woman named Connie Marquez." John's heart tightened. In recent months, he had received more than a dozen similar visits. Desperate parents who had discovered, through an informal information network, that Connie might have clues about their missing children. "Come in, please," said John, leading them to the living room. Regina held out the photograph with trembling hands. "Our son, Michael, disappeared 3 years ago. He was 5 years old at the time. A neighbor told us that she saw a woman with Connie's description talking to him in the park a week before the disappearance." John examined the photo of the boy. Dark hair, big eyes, shy smile. His mind immediately returned to the warehouse where he had found his daughter's drawings. There were hundreds of children's scribbles on those walls. How many other children had passed through there? How many other families were suffering as he had suffered? "Connie is interned in a psychiatric hospital in Camarillo," informed John softly. "She developed early-onset dementia and her memories are fragmented. But I can give you the address so you can try to visit her." It was then that Daisy appeared in the room, stopping abruptly upon seeing the visitors. Her eyes fixed on the photograph that Regina was holding, and she visibly paled. "Michael," she whispered, approaching slowly. Michael was always in the corner of the warehouse drawing cars. Carlos and Regina exchanged glances with a mixture of hope and terror. "Did you know our son?" asked Carlos, his voice choked. Daisy nodded gravely. "He talked a lot about you. He said that Daddy worked fixing cars and that Mommy made chocolate cake on Sundays." Regina broke down in sobs. Carlos was right. Michael loved to talk about his father's auto repair shop and the special cakes that Regina made. "Aunt Connie took him along with the others to a family," continued Daisy. "But I remember he cried a lot. He didn't want to leave." During the next 3 hours, Daisy managed to remember crucial details that led Carlos and Regina to a farm in Gilroy, where they found Michael living with a family who believed they were caring for an orphan. Another impossible reunion becoming a reality. That night, after the Santanas left with information that could reunite their family, John sat in the garden with Mary. They had slowly grown closer over the months, united not only by their love for their daughters, but by a mutual understanding of the suffering they had faced. "Do you realize what we're doing?" asked Mary, watching the girls play under the moonlight. "We are helping other families reunite." John nodded thoughtfully. Daisy remembers so many children who passed through that warehouse. Each of them has a family somewhere, suffering as we suffered. That was how the project was born, that would change not only their lives, but the lives of dozens of families in the region. John used his business resources to create the Reunion Foundation, an organization dedicated to locating missing children and reuniting torn families. Mary went back to school, graduating in psychology to help in the care of traumatized families. Hendrik and Marika became international collaborators, using their contacts in the Dutch community to expand the search network. And Daisy, with her extraordinary memory and knowledge about the informal system of saving children created by Connie, became a fundamental piece in the location process. Even though she was only a child, her contribution was invaluable in bringing together families who had lost hope. In December of that year, during the end-of-year party of the Reunion Foundation, John found himself surrounded by more than 40 children who had been reunited with their families through the work of the organization. In the center of the room, Isabella, Valentina, and Daisy played together, their laughter echoing through the room. "Daddy," said Isabella, running towards him with a drawing in her hands, "look what I made for you." The drawing showed a large house with many windows. In each window there was a different family, fathers, mothers, children, all smiling. In the center of the house, a special family, John, Mary, Isabella, Valentina, and Daisy, surrounded by a heart-shaped fence. "It's our reunion house," explained Isabella, "where all the lost families find their way back." Valentina joined them, holding a yellow daisy that she had picked in the garden. "And this is for Oma Marieke," she said, "to remember that she and Opa Hendrik are also our family." John hugged his 3 daughters, biological and of the heart, feeling a deep gratitude for the tortuous journey that had led them there. The pain of the disappearance would never be completely erased, but it had transformed into something greater, a purpose that gave meaning to suffering and hope to other torn families. That night, while watching the stars from the garden of his house, John realized that he had found something he thought he had lost forever, not only his daughters, but his own capacity to transform pain into love, despair into hope, and loneliness into family. The story that began with the disappearance of 2 girls in a park had become the origin of hundreds of impossible reunions. And at the center of everything, 3 girls who had learned that family is not just who shares the same blood, but who shares the same love, the same tears, and the same determination to never leave anyone lost in the world. A year after the creation of the Reunion Foundation, John's life had found a balance that he never imagined possible. The pain of the daughter's disappearance had transformed into a greater purpose that gave meaning to each day. That night, during the family dinner, John, Mary, Isabella, Valentina, and Daisy, the girls talked about their days, mixing English with Dutch words that they had learned from their chosen grandparents. It was an unconventional family, spread between 2 cities and 2 countries, but it was real, solid, and full of love. And when John looked out the window and saw the lights of Napa Valley lighting up in the night, he knew that he had found something he had been looking for all his life without knowing. The certainty that no matter how lost we may be, there is always someone looking for us. There is always a family waiting to welcome us, and there is always hope that love will overcome separation. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story, giving it a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.